welcome to a special edition of The Appointment. I'm Shereen Bhan, and today I have the privilege of having a conversation with two iconic leaders. One is a Nobel laureate who spent the last several decades in trying to bring the United Nations closer to people. He's been at the forefront of a movement to encourage businesses to respect the environment and human rights. He's made fighting the HIV/AIDS epidemic a personal priority. My second guest today is an entrepreneur with a heart and a conscience, a man who's created one of India's most respected private sector companies. Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General, and Narayana Murthy, founder of Infosys Technologies. Welcome to The Appointment. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on CNBC TV 18. Mr. Annan, if I could start by asking you, your life's work has been about creating a more equitable and a more fair world. If I could ask you this question in the context of what we're seeing in India today, I know you're opposed to indefinite subsidies or indefinite privileges, but as we get ready to put a new government in office, what do you think the priorities should be in order to create a more equitable, a just and a fair community?
I think as we look around the world today, we are seeing the gap between the rich and the poor expand. In fact, there are some very interesting statistics which came out just a week ago indicating that the richest 85 people in the world have as much money as the poorest 3.5 billion. We need to do whatever we can to bridge that gap and ensure that the gap between the rich and the poor within and between countries do not expand. Governments have to focus attention on the welfare of the people. By that, I mean ensuring education, health, ensuring that they have good drinking water and the basic amenities for life, and also to ensure that there's equal access to opportunity.
But how do governments ensure equal access to opportunities? One way of looking at it is through a process of subsidies, which is what we seem to be doing at this point in time in countries like India. Other ideas in terms of revenue mobilization that governments around the world today are looking at is things like bringing estate taxes or estate duties back, taxing the super rich, for instance. Are you in favor of that sort of revenue mobilization?
No, taxation has to be progressive. Taxation has to be based on capacity to pay, and that approach is not something I would fight with. And in fact, in many societies, you do tax the rich more and use the resources, tax the rich, tax the companies, and use the resources to improve the welfare of the people.
It's very important for us to remember that our priority in India today is creation of jobs. That's the only way we can solve the problem of poverty. And if we want to do that, taxation has to be at a level which will attract more and more and more investment, both from domestic investors as well as foreign investors. So we have to walk a very fine line between our desire to mobilize more and more taxes, or having higher percentage of taxes, and our ability to create more and more jobs. So this is something we have to debate and discuss very carefully before we go ahead and say that we will tax the rich at extremely high rates.
Do you perhaps think, Mr. Murthy, that we could see a review of the tax on the super rich that was imposed by Mr. Chidambaram if there is a new government that comes into place, which is a non-Congress, non-UPA government? Do you believe that this tax should be done away with?
No, I'll tell you what PC did, Mr. Chidambaram did, is really not punishing rate. I think a small percentage of additional taxes for the super rich, I think is perfectly okay. I don't see any issue. In fact, UK and most European countries have much higher levels of taxation than India. So I don't think that is an issue. All that I was saying was you should not get to 75% or something like that. That happened in France. So that's what I meant.
All right, there will be a furor if that indeed does happen. But Kofi Annan, let me move to another issue that corporate India has been grappling with at this point in time, and that is the issue of corporate social responsibility with the new Companies Act that has been passed by Parliament in India to make corporate social responsibility, in a sense, mandatory. You were at the forefront of launching the UN Global Compact movement, an initiative that is over a decade long. While there's been a lot of positives that movement has thrown up, there's also criticism or skepticism on the efficacy of that. There are questions on whether the UN Global Compact needs more teeth, whether it needs a better governance system to ensure accountability. How would you rate the success and the failures, to your mind, of the UN Global Compact?
I think when we started the Global Compact, very few companies signed on. Today we have well over 8,000 companies around the world who are members of the Global Compact. The issues you've raised were raised then in 1999 when I first launched the Compact, with civil society groups in particular saying that, Mr. Secretary General, what you are suggesting the companies should undertake must be mandatory. They should be forced to do it. That was a pipe dream. As Secretary General, I had no authority to force any company to do anything they didn't want to do. Basically, what we tried to do was to get the companies to understand that they operate within community, and the health of the community is also important for their business, and that doing good is good for business. We also felt using transparency, you can get a lot done.
Do you then believe that even today a more soft consensual approach should be what governments should adopt as far as corporate social responsibility is concerned?
I think the responsibility of governments are different. Responsibility of an individual like me or the United Nations, or the role companies decide to play, is also quite different. But you do have a regulatory responsibility for governments. Governments have to create the right environment for corporations to operate and encourage them to do the right things. Companies can volunteer to do what is right without waiting for governments to pass laws. And so the voluntary, transparent approach to some of these issues and the way we tackle them, I think, is very important. And that was the spirit behind the Global Compact, which I think has worked reasonably well.